that role that everybody knows, that myself and my wife wished to carry on, but was stopped from being able to do that back in 2020.
Royal shockwaves erupt tonight as Prince Harry is reportedly in tears after Samantha Markle unveils what she claims are explosive DNA results tied to Meghan's past. Sources say Harry was completely blindsided, his voice shaking, eyes red, as whispers of betrayal ripple through private circles. But was it a hidden chapter from 1997, a sealed record finally exposed, or a family secret rewritten by science? Meghan is said to be furious, Samantha unflinching, and the truth may change everything. What exactly did that DNA test reveal? The moment the evidence surfaced. At the center of the storm is not a rumor, not a blurry photograph, not an anonymous source, but a claim of DNA evidence. According to Samantha Markle, the long-whispered mystery surrounding 1997 is no longer just speculation buried in online forums. She alleges that genetic testing has produced results directly tied to that year, the same year repeatedly described as a missing piece in Meghan Markle's timeline. For years, critics pointed to 1997 as an unexplained gap. Now Samantha insists science has stepped into the argument. The claim is explosive, that genetic markers allegedly link Meghan to a child who has been the subject of persistent speculation. Samantha has not framed this as gossip or theory. Instead, she presents it as documentation, lab results, biological data, something measurable and verifiable. In her telling, this is no longer about family drama. It is about DNA, and DNA, unlike memory or narrative, does not adjust itself to public image. What makes this moment so intense is the reported reaction from Prince Harry. Sources close to the situation suggest that when he was shown the alleged documentation, it was the first time he had seen anything of this nature. No prepared statement, no polished explanation, just papers placed in front of him, detailing genetic connections tied to 1997, the same 1997 that later became controversial when records connected to Meghan Markle were said to be sealed in December 2018, 7 months after the royal wedding in May 2018. Harry, described as visibly shaken, was reportedly overwhelmed. Not angry at first, just stunned. The kind of silence that fills a room when something does not make sense. Those who claim to have insight into the moment describe disbelief, followed by emotion, tears, questions, a feeling of being blindsided. If the allegations are false, the shock would still be devastating. If there is truth behind them, the implications are even heavier.
Certainly after the pandemic and everything else, we crave that. We crave being able to go high and
Samantha's position appears calculated. She has moved away from emotional accusations and toward what she calls proof. By invoking DNA testing, she shifts the conversation from opinion to biology. This is not about conflicting interviews or tabloid headlines. It is about genetic matches, and that distinction matters. In a world where narratives can be shaped, DNA stands apart as something difficult to manipulate. The weight of this development lies in what it suggests. If genetic results connect Meghan to events tied to 1997, why did that year become so controversial later? Why were records allegedly sealed in December 2018 after her marriage to Prince Harry? And most importantly, what exactly did Harry know before that moment? Those close to him suggest the pain was not only about the claim itself, but about timing, about trust, about whether the full story had been shared. Because if science has entered the discussion, then the conversation changes entirely. It is no longer about who said what in an interview. It becomes about evidence. And as alleged documents quietly circulate, a heavier question eclipses headlines. What did the DNA prove, and who feared its revelation? Stay glued. The story he believed. If the first shock was the sight of alleged DNA documentation, the second wave was far more personal. Because this was no longer about laboratory results alone, it was about the story Prince Harry had been told. The version of events he had trusted when he chose to marry Meghan Markle in May 2018 and build a life with her under the global spotlight. From the beginning, Meghan's public narrative had been clear and consistent. A self-made woman, navigating Hollywood on her own terms, overcoming family tension, and stepping into royal life with honesty and strength. That origin story was powerful. It was repeated in interviews, speeches, and media coverage. It was the foundation of the brand built around authenticity and transparency. And according to those who follow this closely,
because it feels really inclusive and there's representation and it's just like a sweet love story.
it was the story Harry believed when he defended her publicly and distanced himself from critics, including Samantha Markle. But Samantha has long argued that the public version of Meghan's past was incomplete. Not entirely fabricated, she suggests, but edited, smoothed, certain chapters shortened, others left unexplained. And at the center of her claims is that same year that refuses to disappear, 1997, a year that investigators online describe as a gap, a year allegedly connected to birth records under the name Rachel Meghan Markle, a year that later became more controversial when reports surfaced that records tied to that name were sealed in December 2018. The timing of that seal has fueled suspicion. December 2018 was 7 months after the royal wedding. Meghan was fully integrated into the royal family. The world's attention was fixed on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So why, critics ask, would documents connected to 1997 become inaccessible more than 2 decades later, and only after marrying into royalty? Records are sealed for many legal reasons.
And so, well, a 5-week study program that doesn't equate with working at the embassy.
But the sequence of events has become part of the larger narrative Samantha is pushing. For Harry, the emotional weight lies in the possibility that decisions of enormous consequence were made based on a particular understanding of the past. Marriage into the British royal family is not a small step. It carries constitutional implications, public responsibility, and historic significance. If any part of Meghan's history, especially something as serious as events tied to 1997, was not fully disclosed, the question becomes less about scandal and more about trust. Samantha's claim that DNA results now point back to that same year intensifies the contrast. On one side is the story Harry believed. On the other is what biological evidence allegedly suggests. If the two do not align, the tension is unavoidable. DNA does not operate on perception. It does not respond to public relations strategies or carefully worded interviews. It simply reflects biological reality. Those close to the situation describe Harry as struggling not only with the claim itself, but with what it means for the foundation of his marriage. Because if he defended Meghan against family accusations for years, standing firm against Samantha's earlier warnings, what happens if science appears to validate the very concerns he once dismissed?
I think you feel really confident that it was divinely ordered. Maybe all of this, our friendship, you becoming our...
And as attention circles back once again to 1997 and the December 2018 sealing of records, the divide between narrative and evidence grows sharper, raising a deeper, more unsettling possibility that the truth may not lie in what was said, but in what was left unsaid. Now, what happens when sealed records and fading memories collide, suddenly revealing that the loudest truths may hide in silence? Keep watching. The file that refuses to stay buried. By now, the conversation keeps circling back to one stubborn point: 1997. Not because of gossip, but because of paperwork. Online researchers digging through public databases years ago claimed they located a birth entry under the name Rachel Meghan Markle for that year in California. On its own, that discovery might have faded into obscurity, but it didn't, because access to related records later became restricted. Reports began circulating that in December 2018, certain documents connected to that name were sealed. The timing immediately drew attention. Meghan had married Prince Harry in May 2018. She was firmly inside the royal structure. Public interest in her background was intense. And then, suddenly, files tied to a decades-old entry were no longer easily accessible. That sequence of events transformed a quiet administrative detail into a lightning rod. Internet investigators went to work. Some wrote directly to California record offices. Others compared database snapshots, forums filled with screenshots, timestamps, and conflicting interpretations. Was the entry routine? Was it misfiled? Was it connected to someone else with a similar name? The more people searched, the less clarity they seemed to find. What remained constant was the question, why did this particular year carry so much weight? Samantha Markle has now placed that same year at the center of her latest claim. According to her, the alleged DNA results don't just suggest a vague family connection. She ties them directly to 1997.
40 friends to donate 40 minutes of their time to help mentor a woman who's mobilizing back into the workforce.
In her framing, the genetic evidence aligns with the sealed documentation. The implication is not subtle. She is effectively arguing that biology and paperwork point to the same moment in time. That alignment is what changes the tone of the debate. Before, critics were working with timelines and speculation. Now, Samantha suggests there is a scientific component reinforcing the paper trail. Whether the claim holds or not, it intensifies scrutiny. If a birth record exists and genetic testing connects Meghan to a child from that period, the significance of the seal becomes harder to ignore. Supporters argue that records are sealed for many legitimate reasons, such as privacy, clerical corrections, and legal protections. Public figures often take steps to guard personal information. But critics frame it differently. They question whether the restriction was preventative, a normal legal measure, or reactive, an attempt to contain potential fallout once Meghan became a global figure. Prince Harry's reported emotional reaction adds urgency to this question. If he had never examined these details closely before, the sudden convergence of a sealed record and alleged DNA data would feel overwhelming. The issue stops being abstract. It becomes personal. It forces him to revisit conversations, reassess timelines, and confront the possibility that a chapter of the past was more complex than he understood. And so the spotlight remains fixed on that single year, not because it is dramatic on its own, but because every new development, every claim, every document, every whisper of laboratory confirmation leads straight back to it, tightening the focus and raising a sharper, more uncomfortable possibility that the seal was not the end of the story, but the beginning of something far more consequential. So how did one quiet year become origin of whispers, documents, and laboratory claims suggesting the sealed truth was beginning? Stay with us. The question no one can ignore. As attention tightens around paperwork and genetic claims, another issue resurfaces, one that shifts the focus from documents to biology. It involves Meghan's former husband, Trevor Engelson. For years, he has remained largely silent, avoiding interviews and refusing to publicly criticize her. That silence once worked in Meghan's favor. But within online investigative circles, a rumor began circulating that Trevor had allegedly made a private comment suggesting Meghan underwent a hysterectomy during their marriage. It is important to stress, this claim has never been confirmed publicly.
And I think a lot of that gets lost in what can be super dehumanizing when you look at the clickbait culture. And
it exists as an allegation repeated in certain circles, yet its implications are serious enough that it refuses to disappear. Because if such a medical procedure had occurred, it would directly conflict with later narratives surrounding pregnancy. And if it never happened, critics ask why the rumor has not been firmly and decisively dismantled through legal action, especially given how aggressively other media claims have been challenged in the past. This is where the conversation becomes less about personality and more about plausibility. A hysterectomy is not a minor procedure. It eliminates the possibility of carrying a pregnancy naturally. If the allegation were true, it would create a biological contradiction with subsequent events. If it were false, it would be one of the easiest rumors to shut down with medical documentation. Yet no public clarification has been offered, and no targeted lawsuit appears to have addressed this specific claim. Now place that alongside Samantha Markle's latest assertion about DNA results tied to a child allegedly connected to Meghan's past. If genetic evidence were to confirm prior childbirth, it would establish that Meghan was physically capable of having children at some point. That alone would not resolve the medical rumor, but it would complicate the timeline critics have been trying to map. The tension lies in the overlap. On one side, there is an allegation of a medical procedure that would prevent pregnancy. On the other hand, there is a claim of DNA evidence indicating childbirth in an earlier period. Both cannot exist in the same timeline without explanation. Either one is inaccurate, or key details remain undisclosed. For Prince Harry, This is not theoretical. If he is now confronting alleged documentation and renewed scrutiny around past medical claims, the emotional impact is obvious. Marriage, especially under royal protocol, operates within strict expectations, particularly concerning lineage. Transparency is not simply personal. It intersects with tradition and constitutional structure. Any unresolved medical question carries weight far beyond tabloid curiosity. Yet the core issue is not whether rumors are true or false. It is whether Harry was fully informed. If there had been a prior pregnancy, did he know? If there had been a medical procedure, was it disclosed? Those are deeply private matters, but they become publicly charged when DNA results and sealed records enter the conversation. And as the debate grows sharper, one question pressed harder than the rest: if there was a child before Harry ever entered the picture, was that part of the story he was given, or is he only learning now what should have been told long ago? But as whispers grow louder, was Harry told the full truth from the start, or is a hidden past only surfacing now? The sister who changed tactics. As questions around medical history and DNA claims intensify, attention inevitably shifts back to the person driving much of this narrative forward: Samantha Markle. For years, she was dismissed in headlines as the bitter half-sister. Her interviews were often framed as emotional outbursts. Critics portrayed her as attention-seeking, jealous, or motivated by resentment. That image stuck. It was convenient. It made it easier to ignore what she was saying rather than examine it closely. But something has changed. In recent years, Samantha's tone has become noticeably more measured. The volume has lowered, but the precision has increased. Instead of dramatic accusations, she now leans on suggestion. Instead of long rants, she references documents. She speaks about records, timelines, and most recently, DNA. The shift is subtle but powerful. It moves her from the role of antagonist to something closer to a witness claiming she holds evidence. This change in strategy matters. When someone shouts, audiences often tune out. When someone calmly insists they have proof and are willing to stand by it, people lean in. Samantha appears to understand this. Rather than repeating broad criticisms of Meghan Markle's character, she narrows her focus to specific points. The year 1997, sealed records, alleged genetic results. She drops information in fragments, breadcrumbs that invite investigation rather than demand belief. One of the most striking aspects of this situation is the legal silence surrounding her latest insinuations. Meghan has shown she is not reluctant to pursue legal action when she believes her reputation has been harmed. High-profile lawsuits in the past demonstrated a willingness to challenge media outlets directly. Yet when it comes to Samantha's DNA-related claims and the suggestion of a hidden chapter tied to 1997, there has been no sweeping defamation case aimed at shutting down that specific narrative. That absence has fueled speculation about what legal experts call discovery. In any defamation lawsuit, both sides are required to present evidence. If Samantha were sued over claims involving DNA or sealed records, the legal process could compel the disclosure of medical documents, communications, and potentially even genetic testing to establish the truth. For critics, this creates what they describe as a strategic trap. Filing suits could open doors that have remained firmly closed. Samantha appears aware of this dynamic. By framing her statements carefully, often as questions, implications, or references to documentation, she maintains pressure without crossing into explicit declarations that would be easy to challenge in court. It is a calculated approach. She does not need to prove everything publicly. She only needs to suggest that proof exists. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's silence has become part of the story. In earlier controversies, he was vocal in defending Meghan, issuing statements and confronting media narratives head-on. Now, as the focus turns to alleged DNA evidence and unresolved medical contradictions, there is no visible rebuttal from him, no detailed denial, no emotional speech dismissing the claims as malicious lies. Silence can mean many things: legal caution, strategic restraint, exhaustion. But in high-profile situations, silence often speaks loudly. Observers interpret it through their own lenses. Supporters see dignity. Critics see avoidance. What makes this moment different is that the allegations are no longer framed as personal grievances. They are framed as biological questions. Samantha's transformation from outspoken critic to methodical challenger has altered the balance. She no longer appears to be fighting for attention. She appears to be waiting to see whether the pressure of unanswered questions forces a response, waiting to see whether legal action is taken or carefully avoided, waiting to see whether Prince Harry continues to stand behind the narrative he once defended so fiercely. And as the weeks pass without a decisive counterstrike, the tension builds, not just around what Samantha claims to know, but around what Harry may now be wrestling with privately, as the story inches closer to a point where silence alone may no longer be enough to contain it. And how long can silence protect Harry as Samantha's claims grow louder? And what secret could finally force him to speak? Stay tuned. Harry's heart in the crossfire. Harry's heart ached in ways that no public statement, no social media post could ever convey. Behind the headlines and whispered rumors, the reality he faced was raw, intimate, and deeply personal. Every word he had spoken, every decision he had made, now hovered under a shadow of doubt, not just about his family, but about the people he trusted most. Meghan had been his anchor, his confidant, and yet even their shared love could not shield him from the relentless uncertainty pressing against him. He had believed in a version of reality shaped by half-truths and omissions, only to realize that believing one story might have cost him everything he had fought to protect. Samantha Markle's shadow loomed over this fragile world, a constant reminder of how tangled loyalty and betrayal could become. Her voice, once distant and muted in media skirmishes, now carried a sharper edge. Accusations, insinuations, and truths she claimed were undeniable. For Harry, the complexity wasn't simply about who was right or wrong. It was about the personal toll of love and the unbearable weight of knowing that the ones you depend on can sometimes mislead you, whether intentionally or unconsciously. He felt torn between defending his heart and facing the facts, a balancing act no public figure should have to perform under a microscope. Meghan, ever composed in public yet fiercely vulnerable in private, sensed the cracks widening. She saw the strain on Harry's spirit, the quiet despair that came from sleepless nights spent replaying conversations, rereading messages, and questioning the loyalty of family. In those moments, she held him closer than ever, whispering that their truth mattered more than anyone else's narrative. But even with that reassurance, the reality of Samantha's revelations forced them both to confront an unavoidable question. If the DNA results she hinted at were indeed undeniable, how could silence remain an option? What would happen when private truths collided with the unyielding glare of public scrutiny? The cost of believing one version of reality revealed itself in small, relentless ways. Harry found himself replaying past interactions, reconsidering conversations he thought he understood, and wondering whether moments of tenderness had been colored by manipulation or omission. Trust, once given freely, now required careful calibration. And yet, his instinct to protect Meghan and their life together remained unshaken. Love demanded courage, even when the path forward was clouded with uncertainty. Every embrace, every shared look, became a quiet assertion that truth could coexist with loyalty, even in the face of family conflict and public speculation. Isolation, too, had its sting. No longer able to rely entirely on the comfort of old bonds, Harry felt the weight of decisions that had once been easier, now impossibly heavy. The burden was not just about confronting Samantha's words or the potential revelations of DNA evidence. It was about reconciling a lifetime of expectations with the stark reality that personal truth often clashes with collective perception. He wondered, silently, whether choosing protection over confrontation had only postponed an inevitable reckoning. Yet even in this turbulent emotional landscape, there was clarity. The bond between Harry and Meghan, forged through shared trials and unwavering support, was a fortress against chaos. It reminded him that love could be both shield and compass, guiding him through moments where betrayal, rumor, and family tension threatened to define his life. But the cliffhanger remained, inescapable and pressing. If Samantha's claims were verifiable, if DNA confirmed what had long been whispered behind closed doors, the delicate balance of silence would crumble. Harry would be left with no choice but to confront the truth, and with that confrontation, the story would enter a new, unavoidable chapter, one in which emotional honesty and public accountability collided. Now, could the fortress survive if DNA shatters silence, forcing Harry to confront whispers that threaten all he thought protected them? Cracks in the armor. The quiet between Harry and Meghan had grown heavier with each passing day, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful but loaded with unspoken questions. What had once been private reassurance now felt fragile, stretched thin by shadows of doubt. Samantha Markle's persistence, her veiled assertions, and her insinuations had stirred a storm that neither love nor loyalty could fully calm. The heart of the matter wasn't rumor or tabloids. It was authenticity, and the evidence that could no longer be ignored. DNA doesn't bend to opinion, doesn't care for narrative, and in this delicate arena, it became the ultimate arbiter of truth. Every interaction, every careful word exchanged in private, carried the weight of possibility. Harry's mind replayed the moments he had trusted family statements, the decisions he had made assuming honesty and fidelity, only to face the gnawing suspicion that perhaps some truths had been withheld. Meghan felt it too, a tension that love alone could not erase. Their union, once seemingly untouchable, now faced the subtle tremors that arise when biological fact meets emotional trust. Strategic silence had been their shield. No lawsuits, no public denials, sealed records, but that shield was not impervious. It was only a matter of time before the quiet would crack, and the reality Samantha hinted at would demand acknowledgement. The irony wasn't lost on Harry. Authenticity, something he had championed publicly, was now his most private battlefield. Every glance at Meghan, every whispered assurance, had to be balanced with the private reckoning taking place in his mind. How could he maintain stability in a marriage shadowed by questions only DNA could answer? Could love remain enough when the foundation of family truth seemed uncertain? These were questions that no public statement could resolve, no curated image could protect against. The evidence was not gossip, it was biological, undeniable, and irrevocable, and it carried with it a quiet power that neither argument nor affection could negate. The tension between what is shown to the world and what exists behind closed doors had never felt sharper. Meghan, steady yet vigilant, recognized the cracks forming in Harry's usual composure. She knew that the path ahead was about more than defense. It was about confrontation with a truth that demanded integrity. Samantha's presence, persistent and unavoidable, highlighted the fragile divide between private loyalty and public accountability. Every sealed record, every pause in public response, reinforced the paradox. The more they tried to protect themselves, the more apparent the pressure became. Harry's internal struggle mirrored the larger theme of authenticity itself. To question, to doubt, to wonder if past trust had been misplaced was human, but the human heart wrestles uneasily with undeniable evidence. And yet, there was no outright denial, no legal barriers, just the silent, careful choreography of measured responses. The lock of silence was beginning to strain under the weight of impending truth, and the inevitability of DNA evidence loomed over their lives like a quiet verdict waiting to be read. Even in the midst of love, protection, and loyalty, cracks appeared. The union between Harry and Meghan faced its most subtle and relentless test, not of devotion, but of transparency. When silence meets truth, the quiet becomes unbearable, and the armor of secrecy shows its first fissures. The lock was weakening, and as Samantha's claims edged closer to undeniable proof, one thing remained clear: DNA doesn't lie. And when it speaks, even the strongest love must confront what it reveals. So, what do you think? Was the silence a shield or a signal? And if Harry had known the full truth, would love have survived? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.